Every day when I wake up in the morning, I see the sky and I think about the things that you've made. All the beauty and your glory is showing, yeah. It never bores me to look at the ocean. The waves are crashing, the water spraying up in my face. I look above and all the seagulls are soaring, yeah. We've got to overcome the darkness, so we don't get caught in the middle, between the hopeful and the heartless. So, hello, good day, good morning, I just can't stop smiling, because today is a brand new day, and all the darkness and the pain is just fading behind me. Oh Lord, what a beautiful day. All the planets surround me, the way they orbit just boggles my mind, the way the sun keeps on shining, yeah. We've got to overcome the darkness, so we don't get caught in the middle, between the hopeful and the heartless. So, hello, good day, good morning, I just can't stop smiling, because today is a brand new day, and all the darkness and the pain is just fading behind me. Oh Lord, what a beautiful day. There's nothing to fear, it'll be okay. It's the day that the Lord has made. It's the day that the Lord has made. There's nothing to fear, it'll be okay. It'll be okay. It's the day that the Lord has made. That the Lord has made. It's the day that the Lord has made. That the Lord has made. So, hello, good day, good morning, I just can't stop smiling, because today is a brand new day, and all the darkness and the pain is just fading behind me. Oh Lord, what a beautiful day.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. So glad that you are along with us today as we are thinking through God's Word together. We're in Romans chapter 12. It is great to see you all this morning. Hey, Megan, good morning. Child of Elohim, good morning. Mighty Mucky says, good morning. It'll be the best Wednesday all week, indeed. Hey, Warren, may the Lord grant you speedy recovery from COVID. Sorry to hear about that. Good afternoon, Carol. Good to have you with us. Hey, David, Bickard fan, you like that song? Like that part of the song? Very good. You said it's 1:30 p.m., Carol, where you are in Sao Paulo. We're in Colorado Springs. It's 9:30 a.m. here. And I know we've got some Canadians. It's probably a little different there. Mighty Monkey says, Doug, off topic, is the water coming from the temple in Ezekiel 47 the same as Daniel's rock growing into a mountain that fills the whole earth? I think so. At least very closely related. Hey, Caitlin. Warren's out. It's 11:30 his time. All right. So those of you who joined us last night for the Cross to Crown Partners meeting, that was some lively discussion. Glad that you could join us there. And if you want to jump in on the next one, become a partner, and we would love to have you. So we're in Romans chapter 12. And as we discussed, I think it was last night with the partners, the next few chapters, the rest of Romans, it's going to step on our toes. I told the story of how years ago when I preached through Romans in the church I was serving at, when I was in the first 11 churches and some of the heavy controversial doctrinal portions, there was one gentleman in particular who was a very, I would have said at the time, very close friend and a huge supporter of all that I was doing. He loved every minute of it. Then we got to this section where Paul is exhorting us to behave in a certain way, to love one another, to to set aside our own preferences and so on. And he got so upset he eventually left the church. He didn't want to hear it. And I had some others that started complaining. They were all for all the positions I was taking on the earlier parts, but some of this that calls us to a kindness and a self-deference, is that the right word? A self-denial in some ways. They didn't want to hear it. Turns out they were a little more like the Pharisees. Let's not be that way, right? Let's welcome this section of Romans where the apostle is going to call us to love and changing things. Let's welcome it because that's what we want to do. We have the Spirit of God. We are His sons. Let's live like it. All right. So with that, hey, Edgar. David Bickert says, that's so sad. May my heart be open to hear from God. Indeed. May that be all of our postures. I think about, I said last night, all of our toes are going to be stepped on, including mine. So yes, indeed. Hey, Alfred, good morning. Good morning, Dale. All right. So remember the context. I call on you, therefore, brothers, through the compassions of God. God has been so merciful to us. He says, I call on you, present your bodies as a sacrifice. Now, again, just stopping right there. Because God has been merciful to us, we should in turn be merciful to others. And we owe Him everything. So whatever He calls us to, this should not be difficult. This is what worship is in the new covenant, giving our entire selves to God and saying, all right, whatever you want from me, I will do. Right? So that's what he's saying. Present your bodies as a sacrifice, living, sanctified, acceptable to God, your intelligent service or your rational worship, and do not be conformed to this age. This age is not a self-denying, loving age. So don't be conformed to its selfishness. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Think different. For you're proving what is the will of God. What does God want for you? What is good? What is acceptable? What is perfect? What gets you to that goal? Think so as to achieve the goal that God has set. Think so as to be good and acceptable to Him. Well, what is He concerned with? Unity. Unity among Christians. Look where he goes. For I say that through the grace given to me, to everyone who is among you, not to think above what it ought to think, but to think so as to think wisely, or of a sound mind, as to each God dealt a measure of faith. For as in one body we have many members, and all the members do not have the same office, so we the many are one body in Christ, and members of one another, each one. This acceptable goodwill, this renewed mind, is to lead to unity. Unity in the body. Now, just let that settle in for a minute. We are to strive for and work toward unity. Seeing ourselves as a member of the one body of Christ. That is what is good and acceptable and perfect in God's eyes. That is what a renewed mind produces. Someone asked last night in the partners meeting, how do I handle being in a church where they teach some things that I think are wrong and seriously wrong? In particular, he was bringing up the Ten Commandments. They read from confessions and quote the Ten Commandments regularly, and would hold to a portion of the Old Covenant law, that kind of thing. And for any of us who are persuaded of what we call New Covenant theology, all the things that I've been teaching, It would be hard, right, to sit under teaching where that is the norm and where the leaders believe that we are still under the Ten Commandments as Israel was and that kind of thing. So what do we do with that? Well, it can be frustrating, but I want to remind you of the situation in Rome to which Paul gives this explanation, or exhortation, I should say. This was a church where there was a number of converts from paganism, and no doubt they still had some of their pagan trappings that were being worked out. But then you had this group of Jews that came in, and they were insisting that these Romans get circumcised and keep the Sabbath day on Saturday. Those are some significant differences, aren't they? All right, if somebody came into your service, your church rather, and started insisting that all the men get circumcised, and let's assume that that wasn't a cultural thing anymore, and so none of your men are circumcised, and they started saying, look, this is in the Bible. Got to be circumcised. You got to start keeping the Sabbath. You Romans, you can't eat any of that meat that you bought in a pagan supermarket. You can imagine the turmoil, the dissension, at least that was potentially there in this body. Significant differences. And in that group, Paul says, we are one body with many members. Strive for unity. Right? So, in the midst of your theological differences, strive for unity. And then he says, and having gifts different according to the grace that was given to us. So, Edgar, this may be what you're talking about here. Yeah. God's grace is distributed unevenly. He doesn't give everybody the same abilities, same gifts. It's Christmas time, and I'm always reminded. So today, interestingly, December 13th, today, let's see, my mom, today would have been her 93rd birthday. I believe that's right. She passed away in 2017. Wow, that's hard to, whoa. I'm just having a moment here. That's crazy. That's been that long already. Wow. Okay, so today is my mom's birthday, and she would have been 93. So one of the things around Christmas time that I just can't not remember, because I see this tendency in my wife too. My mom, she had to give her children and grandchildren Christmas gifts that were of equal value. No kidding. One time I got an envelope that had, I don't know, I forget, something like $1.27 in it or something. It was a very small amount, because she remembered that she had given my brother a gift, and what she gave him was, a couple bucks more than what she gave me, and she sent me the difference because she couldn't handle giving us different amounts. And my wife is chiming in saying she would be 96. Thank you. So you're listening, are you? Well, I'm telling on you too. And my wife does the same thing. She wants to make sure that all of our kids are treated evenly. And my mom did the same thing with our grandkids. Now, think about what a gift is. A gift, by definition, is given from a motivation of grace, not obligation. You see that? By definition, a gift is not given out of obligation. It's not owed. If it were owed, it would be a debt. Gifts are given freely. So you're simply imposing your own obligation when you say, okay, everybody has to receive the same thing. And or maybe we're worried about reputation or whatever, but fairness and grace don't belong in the same sentence. Well, God, when he gives his measure of faith to us or measure of grace, he doesn't give it evenly. He's not obligated to give it evenly. And in this context, Paul says he's given us these different gifts to use to bring unity in the church. And we're all given different gifts. And we are to find out what those gifts are and use them to build up the body, to bring unity and holiness to the church. What this means is each one of us has been given a portion, a measure of God's grace, and we need to use that gift for unity and for others. The church needs you, and you need to be giving to the church. Now, he's going to list several gifts here. This is not an exhaustive list, and so I'm not going to spend a lot of time unpacking each one, partly because all we're given here are the words, and we're not given definitions. So all we can go on is what does the word mean, but partly because I want the emphasis for our time here not to be so much the individual gifts, but the idea that God has poured out. If you're a Christian, he's given you a portion of grace that you need to use for the others. Child of Elohim says, how do we know what our gifts are? Do we have more than one gift? Yeah, let me come back around to that at the end, and let's get the flavor here, okay? All right, so he starts off with maybe the hardest one, whether prophecy according to the proportion of faith. So this could lead to all kinds of questions, and I'm just going to tell you up front, I'm not going to entertain them because Paul does not define prophecy here. And frankly, he doesn't exactly define it anywhere. And prophecy is one of the hardest. I see a question there from Oink Oink. Any videos you have up currently that speak on continuationism versus cessationism? The closest would be a series I did on 1 Corinthians a few years ago. And it seemed like there was another... It seemed like there's another series. Anything that has to do with 1 Corinthians would deal with that. But the bottom line is I don't see any indication in the Bible that any gift was temporary or ended in the early church. So I'm not a cessationist by any means. I also think the Spirit is not obligated to dole out all the gifts in every situation in every time. So it doesn't bother me if I don't see certain gifts being used today or in my church or whatever. So to summarize my view, it's expectation without agenda. I expect the Spirit to give gifts for the unity and the benefit of the church. I have no agenda. So I'm going to leave that there. And even prophecy here, I don't think we can get away from prophecy having a predictive element. Prophecy, as I see it, is not synonymous with teaching or preaching. It's nothing like that. It's something else. And it requires faith. Imagine Agabus, one of the prophets we see in the New Testament, predicting famine that's going to come on the earth. Well, that takes faith because you're saying this is going to happen in the future. And you're going to look silly if it doesn't happen. That takes faith. So if that's your gift, great. Use it and believe. Trust the Lord. Or ministry. This is a broad word for serving. For a lot of you, this is where you're at. You just have this tendency to serve others. Do it. The church needs you. One who's teaching. That's me. I must teach. And I'll tell you, this verse is one of the reasons I'm doing this live stream. Because I do teach a lot in our home fellowship, but I also just sort of felt this compelling that I have the technology today to teach those beyond my home fellowship. And look, we got people on here from all over the world, which is wonderful. And so I take Paul seriously here that I have been given this portion of God's grace. I need to use it. I need to give it as often as I can. So that's one of the reasons I'm doing the live stream, because I want to be faithful to this instruction. One who is exhorting some of you. So this word can be to encourage, to speak rather boldly, to call people to hold fast or to overcome sin or whatever. It's a pretty broad word, but it involves having some insight and a willingness to say the hard or motivating thing. When we talk about encouragement, Albert says, I also encourage. Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. When we talk about encouragement, it's not flattery. And I think we sometimes use the word that way. If I make you feel good, somebody makes you feel good, oh, they're encouraging. No, just telling you, they like your outfit. That's not encouragement. Encouragement is instilling courage. And when do we need courage? When we're afraid. So when you see someone who's fearful and your tendency is to say, I want to call them to hope and to trust the Lord and to walk in faith, I think that's this idea of exhorting. So if that's you, then do it. The church needs you because there's a lot of fearful people around and you need others who have this gift, don't you? He who is sharing in simplicity. This is the word for giving. Some of you are just wired by the Spirit of God to give. And I think it's mostly financially or other resource, wealth. How about that? We'll broaden it to wealth. You have a tendency to give of your wealth. Paul says, do it with simplicity, with simple focus. So some people will give, but they make it so complex that it doesn't seem like a natural gift. It's almost like they have to talk themselves into it, and here are all the criteria, and here's all the, the principles that lie behind it or whatever. And other people are like, oh, you have a need? Boom. Where do I write the check? Give me your Venmo, right? PayPal or Cash App. Boom. How do I get it to you? And it's very simple in their mind. You have a need, I have something, I'm going to give it. We need people like that, for sure. One who is leading. This is a word that means to stand in front of and making decisions and giving direction. So Paul says, if that's your gift, then you need to exercise that and be diligent or zealous in it. Don't be afraid. If you see this is where we need to go, then you give the instruction, hey, let's go here. The church needs people like that. And he who is doing kindness or mercy, do it cheerfully. Mercy, the coming alongside the one who's just beaten down. It can be financially. It can just be through, just hard times. This person comes alongside and cheerfully ministers and gives sympathy and sometimes empathy and care for the one who's beaten down. The body of Christ needs all of these and whatever else the Spirit gives to individuals for unity and holiness. And so you have a role to play. So child of Elohim, back to your question, how do we know? Well, you can start by kind of going through this list and saying, okay, what am I naturally inclined toward? What do other believers see in you? Right? If you think you're a teacher and you teach and nobody shows up, maybe you're not a teacher. If you teach for a while and you start trying to ascertain whether they are learning anything and they're not learning anything, maybe that's not your gift. If you think you're an encourager, an exhorter, and everybody walks away from you feeling completely crushed, and no one is motivated to go strive for better, maybe that's not your gift, right? On the other hand, if somebody comes along and says, man, every time you talk, people are ready to go get it done. Maybe that is your gift, is exhortation. Or if people just gravitate toward you when they're down, I mean, this sounds horrible, I guess. Mercy is not my gift. Someone who's, I'm looking to see if my wife is going to amen this. Now I'm commanded to be merciful, so I strive to be merciful, but my tendency when someone is down is to call them to get up. My wife, on the other hand, is going to come get down with you and just be kind and gracious. Well, the church needs both, doesn't it? There is a time when things are really hard for you and you need someone like my wife to come along and just be gentle with you. And again, join you where you're at. But at some point, the temptation for me is to call you to get up and get back to it too soon. Right? You need someone who's merciful in the moment. But the temptation to my wife is to never call you to get up and get after it, but to just stay so that downtrodden experience feeling you're having becomes the norm, and it can get into a pity party, right? And selfishness. And then you do need someone to come along and exhort you, get up and get after it. So my wife and I make a great team. We just have to make sure that we're exercising our gifts in the right time and in right proportion. You can see how the body needs all of these. So give us some thought based on this list, maybe. Ask someone who knows you well, what do you see? But don't overthink it. Just see how you can motivate other believers to righteousness and unity and being effective in the kingdom. And trust the Spirit. It's His gifts, right? Trust the Lord. They're His gifts. All right, let me catch up on a couple things and then we'll call it a day. Alfred says healing is not mentioned. Yeah, it's not mentioned here. It is elsewhere. Lon says, thank you. Appreciate that. Edgar, Doug's encouragement, stick to the text, stop reading commentaries. Indeed. Carol says, I also like to think we're not supposed to say how God is or is not supposed to act, although He does give us some idea of what to teach and inspire people. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, He's sovereign over what He gives and when He gives it. And even like Paul healed, but he didn't heal all the time, right? Peter and John, they healed, but they didn't heal every single sick person. Jesus didn't heal every sick person he came in contact with. So there's no, I don't see anything that says God can't change the gifts even in a person when the need arises. And he says, well, I don't want to go to other texts. Alfred says, having faith in the word gives us courage. Indeed. Have courage to stick to the text. Discernment, Alfred says, is his gift and teaching. Use it, brother. Use it. General Patton, yeah. Mark says, iron sharpening iron, uses different swords. It's good. So, Pastor, if you're down, you're better off around your wife than she is around you. Yes, that is a fair statement, which means, again, I'm called to be merciful. That just takes more work for me than it does for her. On the other hand, when somebody needs to get up and get after it, she's got to work herself into saying the hard things sometimes. All right, we're going to leave it there. This is so important. You have a role, and you need to fulfill that role so that we pursue unity and growth as a body. All right, have a great day. We will see you tomorrow, Lord willing. Take care.